So last week we were talking about how to adjust the parallax out of rifle scopes. And just a quick review if you're just joining us, parallax is an optical problem that you get when the focus between your eye, the crosshair, and the target are not tuned up properly, so that if your eye moves in relationship to the scope, it makes the crosshair move in relationship to the target. The problem with that is that if your face is not exactly in the same position every time, the gun is going to be shooting in a different place every time, so your zero will always be wandering. What we talked about on the last video was, in order to remove that, you need to have a gun that has the ability to both focus on the target as well as your eyes focus on the crosshair, and you do that by changing or adjusting the diopter as well as the focus of the scope. Not all scopes have that, so we get into a problem with, those are generally more expensive scopes and not everybody can afford that. Also, you may just be in a situation where somebody hands you a gun to use and you're just stuck with what you've got, and it may not have the ability to adjust the parallax out of the scope. So how else can you deal with those sort of problems if your scope is not parallax adjustable? So before we get too far, we need to get you up to speed on a couple of terms in relation to rifle shooting. First thing is cheek weld. That is your placement of your face against the comb of the stock. Now there are some guns like this L96 that actually have an adjustable comb on it where you can raise or lower the comb so that your cheek weld is in a perfect position so that your eye is automatically lined up with the scope. The second thing I want to talk about is eye relief. That is the distance between your eye and the scope. Third thing we want to talk about is what's called scope shadow. Now you can see scope shadow when you move your face in close to the scope and then begin moving your face back away. You'll notice that there becomes a shadow around the perimeter of the lens, and you can actually see it's like just a black shadow. That is a scope shadow. So we can use that in order to defeat the parallax problems of the scope. Parallax becomes a problem when you're getting your cheek weld set up and you're not always in the same exact place. So your head may move a little bit forward, backward, or whatever. And if it's not in exactly the same place, that crosshair is going to start moving on you. So the best way to get around that, if you have a scope that is not adjustable for parallax, is start off with a good cheek weld, get your eye in close enough so that you have a perfect picture through the scope, and then just slowly begin moving your face back until you have a scope shadow beginning to appear on the scope. What you want to do is move back until you have an even shadow. If it's favoring one side or the other, get it so that the shadow is exactly centered on the scope in the lens. And that way you can always get the same exact cheek weld every single time. So even though this scope may not be adjustable for parallax, you can still get fairly accurate groups, but you have to get the proper amount of scope shadow so that it's evenly balanced around the perimeter of the scope. You can actually get fairly decent accuracy even with a fairly inexpensive scope. Something you might want to try if you don't have access to a better scope or better equipment or whatever, that's probably one of the best ways I've known to get better accuracy out of cheap scopes. If you want to find out more about this stuff, it's a good idea to stop into the showroom. We're open 5 days a week. If you have any questions, feel free to drop by. We'll be glad to chew the fat with you. And until the next time, don't let the bastards get you down.